way towards becoming a bridle horse, but that's a very slow and gradual process.
Hi, and I'm Shannon Reed. I am now the consulting veterinarian for RRP. I started out as a groom for a friend and then took a horse in 2017. That was a pretty accomplished horse that had joints that didn't bend so well. So he was not going to be an eventer for me. So I took on an entirely new sport I'd never learned before and did competitive trail. So I spent months with him climbing through the backwoods of Missouri, learning to trail. And it was just a really, really good learning experience for both of us. And then the next year, which is why I'm kind of pumped up about this discussion tonight, I took another horse that was out of the same sire as him that was supposed to be good to go and get going right away. And he ended up having a mess of congenital sinus problems. I had to take his head apart, I'm a surgeon, and put it back together. So we spent a lot of time in a stall, a lot of medications, and then a lot of walking. And we didn't get riding until sometime in March a little bit, didn't canter till April. Really ended up doing pretty well in 2018. So I took the alternative route to get my horse ready.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that part. I don't have an arena at all. Like, not even like, oh, I don't have an indoor arena. I have no arena. I have cornfields and cow pastures. So when Kristen first floated this idea of doing a webinar about having some setbacks, especially in the winter months when you see everybody, you know, in sunny Florida cantering courses and you're still like digging your way out of a snowbank, I volunteered. So I figured maybe some of my hashtag Team No Arena experience might be beneficial to everybody else. So hopefully everybody will get some stuff out of this. Post your questions if you have them. We didn't get any ahead of time, but we'll try to pause and catch questions as we go too. So.
Okay. And the other thing I should mention, sort of bringing to the table, is I did a study a few years ago that just got published last year that was looking at about 1,400 horses. Most of those were off the track thoroughbreds that were being rehomed, and we did comparison studies and looked at everything through that and have a lot of information about what happens to horses in the year after they come off of the track and return to homes. But the first thing I want to tell you guys is that of all the horses that had problems and everything that went on, I think it was 93% of people, their horse had resolved its issue at the end of 1 year. So that is my hang in there, no matter what happens. For 93% of those 1,400 horses, and that includes some non-thoroughbreds, they were back to what the person wanted them to be within a year. So that's my little hang on, there's hope yet.
There is light at the end of the tunnel. So in thinking about, you know, our subject matter tonight, we set up 4 different categories of horse that we're likely to be dealing with right now. So Shannon kind of spelled that out, so I'll let her go through those 4 types of horse, and folks who are tuning in can kind of figure out which type of horse they might have or type of scenario.
Sure. So we looked at this and we have a couple kind of different areas, and I'm sure there's horses that won't fall into this category because that's horses, they make their own category. But the first horses we sort of were thinking about were those horses that were on strict stall rest for injuries. They're not leaving the stall. So that's category 1, strict stall rest for injuries or for other reasons. I'm not sure. Maybe you're like living in Ohio and the only place that's dry right now is your stall. That could be another reason. I'm experiencing that one. Second category that we were talking about was for horses that are allowed walking for injuries. So they are on a rehab program and they are in the walking stage of their rehab program. Third category was people without arenas or safe areas to ride in, poor weather or dark.
That's me. Sorry, just reason.
Oh, yeah, no, I was like, why is she waiting? So that's you. People without arenas or safe areas to ride in, poor weather and dark. And then we have a 4th category, which I'm not sure how much we'll be able to get to tonight, but I think a lot of what we're talking about will already address that anyways, and that's horses whose behavior keeps them from being ridden safely. So those are our 4 categories that we sort of thought about.
Yeah, so hopefully, hopefully we don't have a lot of number 4s. Although I feel like I was a little bit in that boat. Sometimes you'll be in like a 3 and a 4 where you have a horse that just can't be ridden safely outside of an arena, which is fine and a totally appropriate place to be. And we'll, you know, get all you guys trail riding later in the summer. But one thing I think is really important, maybe the like less sexy part that nobody wants to be told, is that a large part of getting ready for the makeover, it's really it's a mental game for you as a trainer. So it's not just getting the horse ready, but it's also like, how are you as a person going to deal with that timeline? And the timeline, of course, is completely self-imposed. So yes, obviously we have the makeover in October, and everybody's working towards that big goal, and everybody wants to, do themselves and their horses proud and be as prepared as they want to be. And of course, we want you all very prepared as well as a person going to deal with, hello, self. But really, like, to be successful in all of this build up to the makeover, it's a mental game for you. So if you didn't have the makeover, everybody just thought experiment with me for a minute. If you didn't have that big October show goal, how would you be dealing with the fact that you can't ride right now? Like, chances are you would just be saying, well, I guess I can't really ride right now, and that's kind of a bummer, but spring's coming soon, and I'll be able to get out to some local arenas, or I'll have, a safe place to ride, and it'll all be fine. A lot of times when we get all worked up, and I was there too in 2018, thinking like, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to do this. Like, the makeover is so close, it's 7 months away, and like my horse couldn't canter. A lot of that, then I just had to keep telling myself like, okay, well, if I didn't have the makeover, where would I want this horse to be? And I wouldn't really expect that horse to be able to canter, because my horse had a year off before that. I could canter if I pointed him towards like the longest, straightest, most uphill part of the farm, and then like used that airplane runway to kind of get him going. And he had like a 67.5 foot long stride, and I couldn't actually turn while cantering. So it was very exciting. And at the time I was like, there's no way I'm going to get this thing into like, let alone an arena circle. So I didn't canter for 3 months. I don't think I looked that horse until April. And amazingly, after doing nothing but walk and trot work for 3 months in the snow and the mud, the canter had improved all by itself. So if you're also in that boat, forget that big timeline at the end of the year. I know we're all wanting to be as prepared as we can be, but just train your horse like there is no big show in October. So think of where you'd want that horse to be. If you're just training that horse for yourself, where would you want that horse to be in the 3 months? And make that your next goal. And then think, okay, where would I want that horse to be in 6 months? And make that your next goal. So even if you can't ride right now, there's no reason to start that, self-imposed panic. Unless you're that kind of person, which, I am too. I think we all are to a certain extent. So just, back your timeline up a little bit. There are going to be some of you that are going to get to August when we do final entry and really question if you are going to be ready. And unfortunately, that's going to happen to some of you, maybe a lot of you, just because green horses are green horses. So you have to decide, of course, by final entry if you're going to be ready. If you're not sure, I always recommend like make your final entry, and then you still have almost 2 months to decide if you're going to actually go to Kentucky or not. But there's maybe 3 reasons that you might not actually get to Kentucky. So your horse is maybe not mentally ready for that environment. Your horse is maybe not quite as trained as you want it to be. Or we also might run into issues that, your horse is maybe a little unsound, or your horse is a little too thin. I ended up with 2 stone bruises, not me. My horse ended up with 2 stone bruises in his front feet in August, I think right before final entry. So I was really on the fence about whether I should even make that final entry and go. And I did make the entry, and his bruises recovered, and I was so happy that all I did was trail ride him for the last month. I didn't ask him to do anything remotely like training wise, just because I was really grateful to have a sound horse again. So there's definitely reasons that some of you will not make it to Kentucky, and some of those things like ill-timed abscesses and stone bruises are kind of out of your control. So just, be optimistic, also be realistic that, they're horses and they're big, fragile, dumb babies who like to kill themselves in very creative ways. Some of those things are, of course, up to your control. So, you can make the decision that if your horse is not mentally ready to go to that makeover environment, maybe it's time to scratch. If your horse is maybe not as far along and as training as you want it to be, you might also scratch. And of course, there are many different options you can do too. So if you have it in your mind that like, I really want this horse to be a show hunter, but he's just not ready to put a course together, you can enter dressage, you can enter the freestyle. So there's definitely options if you still want to participate in the makeover, but you don't think your horse is ready for that discipline you thought you wanted it to do. No one's locked you into that discipline until final entry. So you have plenty of time. I see we have some questions. I'm just going to take a look at those.
While you're looking at those, I'll just add to, and if you have to switch to another discipline, it's 100% not wasted time because every discipline teaches a horse something. I took one of my eventer now to competitive trail, and he knows a heck of a lot more about using his feet now and jumping than he did before we did competitive trail. So just throwing that out there, that it's not a waste or a loss if you have to swap disciplines.
Okay, so we have a question about feet. If you're waiting for feet to get sole depth and walls to thicken, do you have to have time off while this happens? Some of that is going to be, working with your farrier, and if you're also working with a vet and x-raying those feet to determine sole depth, they might give you a better plan. I'm not going to tell you what I think you should do, but in my experience, while for helping horses transition off the track, I give them barefoot time in the winter, largely because I have a lot of mud and snow. And then I just, work them according to what they're comfortable with. So that is my experience. I don't know if Shannon has anything to add to that.
Yeah,
if you're waiting for sole depth and walls to thicken, do you want to give them time off?
I think I would add that I love that you said it, work with your farrier and your vet, but also to realize that work with a plan to actually do something with your horse. It might just be walking, and if they don't have sole depth, you might be buying some boots for them and walking down the dirt road to get them to actually build up foot. Because most of the time when you want to build up foot, there has to be some movement going on. So if you are confined to just walking in boots, you can get a lot of things done before you have enough sole depth grown. So don't think of it as, I can't wear shoes, I can't ride. It's what boots might fit. How do I work through this? A lot of people go to glue-ons. That's a whole other story, but you're not confined to doing nothing just because you don't have sole depth. You may just have to change your plan to say, what can my horse do right now? And what can they learn while they can do those things?
And we have a very long list of suggestions for things you can do too. So hang with us, Elise, and we will get to all sorts of ideas that you may or may not want. We sort of address, jumping, especially I know people are a little concerned about the height change in the hunters. And again, it's going to come down to whether or not you think your horse is prepared. So if you could normally prepare a green horse for a 2-6 round, on that 10-month timeline, some people can, some horses just can't handle that timeline. So again, that's up to you as a trainer and a horseman to make that decision. And, if you're not going to be ready, maybe point that horse to a flat only discipline. So, keep in mind the makeover, as I know we preach this a lot, but the makeover is a step on your journey with the horse. So this isn't your final destination. So if a horse isn't ready to go 2-6 in a full course, maybe it will be the year after the makeover. Year 2 with a makeover graduate is awesome, by the way. It's amazing how much they'll retain like little sponges. So if you're not quite ready to do what you thought you wanted to do at the makeover, you can still definitely find a lot of cool ways to participate. It just might not be in what you intended to do right off the bat. Hope that helps, Elise. All right. Okay. All right. So hopefully everyone has read their winter magazine cover to cover several times because we spend a lot of time putting that together. We hope you enjoy it. Hopefully, and I have typed this out a lot in the trainer group, read that article that interviews all 10 discipline winners from last year, and you'll notice a theme that emerged. It was almost a strong enough theme that I almost pulled it out from the article to make that kind of the theme of the whole thing. Elise didn't get her magazine. Elise, you can buy back issues in the store if you need one. And you can also, if you're a member, you can access that online and you can read that on your computer or on your phone. A lot of our winning trainers didn't start seriously working those horses until April. So if you're like, oh my God, I'm behind, literally our winners didn't all start until April. So you have plenty of time to make it work. And that includes professionals and amateurs. So Tony Harmon, I know you're out there somewhere, but we know you're there.
Okay, I think I have the next part, but I just wanted to interrupt to say that Claire really likes her neckerchief, so that's okay.
Thanks, Claire.
All right, so we have these categories that we talked about earlier. Again, remember, if you weren't here, that's going to be horses that are on strict stall rest for injuries, horses that are allowed walking for injuries, people without arenas or safe arenas to ride in poor weather or dark, and horses whose behavior keeps them from being ridden safely. So right now, what we're going to kind of move into is what are the things that we can do. And of course, as a veterinarian, and you guys will get sick of me hearing this, is we always want you to check in with your veterinarian. And that also doesn't include checking in on a veterinarian who doesn't know much about your horse, or going to OTV Connect and asking them what they think. We mean literally checking in with your veterinarian that diagnosed the problem. Hey, what should you do? But as a veterinarian, what I can tell you is that generally when I find a problem, I have a set list of discharges that gives me a rehab plan. I go to the computer, I pull it up, I plug it in, and I say, here's a rehab plan of things you can do. And it's a starting point. I don't always have the time or the knowledge of that personal owner's conditions to be able to say, you can do all of these things also. So if you get a discharge from a veterinarian that says, I need you to hand walk for 10 minutes a day, that's good. But you can also say, okay, call back the vet and be like, I was thinking about doing some ground poles while hand walking, or I want my horse to side pass while hand walking. And most of the time, if you are going to use the gait is the same, G-A-I-T, not gate like going through, then the vet may be able to give you some different ideas. So don't be locked into the discharge instructions or what they told you to do, because they may have had a shortened period of time to talk to you, write it down, and things like that. And there's lots of different ways that you can go within the confines of that rehab. So that's my first flag is, yes, talk to your vet, but don't be limited to the words they already told you. Have a conversation with them with some of these ideas or things that you come up with on your own, and they'll just say no if it's not going to work. And the other thing is, also, don't rehab based off of what of your friend's plan was for the same thing. Every tendon injury is going to be a bit different. Every joint surgery is going to be a bit different. And don't kind of go off the rails without talking back to the original person that diagnosed it or looked at it. They may have some different ideas. So I just want to kind of put that plug in here before we get started. So I'm going to talk about some of the really basic things that can be done in that hand walking phase of things. And so in the hand walking, here's some things that I found to do that really helped expand things for my horse. Is I found places to walk together, and we walked and we walked and we walked at like walking the dog down the street. And for a while I just had a driveway, but in that driveway, we walked up and down the driveway and we stopped and we side passed and we learned, move your shoulders over when I touch your shoulder, move your hindquarters over when I touch your hindquarters, back up 5 feet and stand still. So we did ground time, we did moving over. We walked up to every object that we could find, we investigated it, and I praised him when he touched it. So you know what my horse was not afraid of by the time I got to the makeover? Driveways, mailboxes, garbage trucks, garbage, trash cans, cardboard boxes, potbelly pigs. So there's lots of things you can do at a walk to desensitize your horse. Have someone ride by on a bicycle while you're doing things at a walk. If you take it back a step and you're stuck in a stall, we have some lists for things. And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here, but you can do a whole lot of things also stuck in a stall. So I'm going to stay in my lane of this thing that Kristen made here to keep me so a good vigorous hand walk can safely build fitness. So if you're allowed to walk for a half an hour, get 2 miles in there. You can do that. Talk to the vet, make sure it's okay, but you can build a lot of fitness and a lot of top line and things like that with a walk. The other thing you can ask is if you've been told to hand walk, sometimes that's shorthand for veterinarians, tack walking may be okay, or walking on a pony. So if you're being pony, that horse can walk there as well. So we want to just introduce that hand walking is a great time to learn stepping over poles, moving sideways, going towards a fence, away from a gate, things like that.
And I'll speak to the people who are not necessarily limited to hand walking for veterinary reasons, but if you're limited to groundwork for footing or safety reasons, or your horse is a little bit of a loon with no arena. I hiked like a ton. And of course, like I could probably make time to go to the gym if I really wanted to, but hand walking a few miles a day was good for me. I worked our way up to going up and down a lot of hills. Hills are a fabulous way to build a lot of fitness. Again, stick to your vet rehab plan. Some vets might not want you schlepping up and down a hill with your horse, but going up a hill, going down a hill, going like along the shoulder of a hill, that builds balance. That's really valuable to do. And again, if your horse is a little fresh in big open spaces, then maybe do that in hand. You can also trot a little bit if you are a bit of a runner. Again, watch your footing, because whenever I try to do that, I slip in the mud or lose a boot, because all I have is like mud pastures right now. If you don't have hills, or your hills are like really far away, and it's a little scary to get there right now, you can sort of replace the action with a raised pole. So you can start with a single pole on the ground. You can raise those up. You can, add different obstacles and stuff in there. It took me 8 months, and I'm still trying to teach Jobber how to go over a pole. So we're much better on hills. And yeah, Shannon mentioned ponying. You can get that horse out on some hills, ponying off of another horse. So then you're also working 2 horses at once. And for all you guys who might want to tackle ranch work, or even if you don't, that's a really good way to introduce things like cattle. Also can be a good way to introduce things like trail riding with a dog. For all you field hunters, start with 1 dog and work your way up to a whole pack of hounds. But ponying, I know, like we always use the Mansmans as an example. Those guys really know how to pony. So give them a follow on Facebook at Pacific Farm, and you'll see lots of videos of them ponying horses all over the place. But if you have a good broke horse and you're pretty dexterous at riding with one hand and leading with the other, you can get all sorts of stuff done with your makeover horse, even if you can't actually ride it. Back to Shannon.
Okay. I'm going to start with 2 questions that showed up on the Facebook. The first one, I might butcher some names here. So I'm going to say Norel. Norel commented that I had my coming 5-year-old teeth done this week, and my vet said she looks more like a coming 7-year-old because she has a 7-year hook and her front teeth are worn. Is this common in OTTBs? And should I be worried she isn't who her papers say she is? So I don't think you should be worried much at all, especially if she's tattooed. If she's tattooed, that is who she is. What we do see is, depending on the hay that they're eating, where it is grown, what part of the country they are from, and who does their dentistry work, they can have some changes on their teeth that are not related to the actual age changes we measure as veterinarians. So when I hear the word 7-year hook, that's often what happens when the teeth they've all come in and things start to change and they get a hook on the front tooth. But that can also happen, and I hate to say it, sometimes dentistry on the track may not involve sedation or speculums. They're just taking off the sharp points on young horses. That's something that's easy to miss with that type of dentistry. So I guess I'm not surprised that you're experiencing that. I wouldn't be worried that it's not the horse you thought it was, or her age is wrong, as long as she has a tattoo and that tattoo matches up with their papers. And then the second question was from Jill, and she asked, while you were talking about hill work and things like that, is this to gain balance? So I'll answer a little bit from my perspective and then throw it back to you. And I think all the things that we're talking about, sure, they'll help you gain balance. They'll also help them to learn to use their feet independently. A lot of thoroughbreds have had a lot of exposure to other things besides just the track before they get there, but then they're training on a flat track that's groomed. So when you're getting out there and doing hills and doing pole work and things like that, you're getting them back into the world they're going to experience when they get to the makeover. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so going up and down the hill, that's good for building strength, and also, balance to a certain extent, especially going down hills. But it's, when you're going along, generally when we talk about hill work, everyone starts thinking going up and down. But if you're going along the hill, sort of what I call it, like along the shoulder of the hill, so that one side of the horse, laterally is a little higher than the other, that's really good for teaching balance. So that's, I think, an oft neglected part of hill work. But yeah, definitely that's good for your balance. Good question, Jill.
Okay. So another thing I'm going to hit on is how many unmounted skills you can teach before you can ever even get on your horse. That will be a huge benefit to your horse in life, and then at the RRP. Because when you get to the makeover, there's going to be a lot of things going on. It's a big atmosphere. You want to have your basics super solid. And there's so many unmounted skills that can help you with your basics. So one of the unmounting skills you can do is ground tying. not just for the Western horses. The English horses need to learn to ground tie too. What if you want to push a pole over somewhere? Or what if you want to get off your horse and fix your boot? What if you just want your horse to stand still in the middle of the warm-up arena while horses are zooming around you? Ground tying is something that you can teach very easily to a horse that's rehabbing, and it's a solid skill that if you teach it to them right, you can fall back on it as something they know how to do when they get to a big show. So I recommend ground tying as well as something that you can practice. You can practice, if you can walk, you can set up a folded up tarp in the aisleway of your barn. You can practice walking over a tarp with water on it, walking over a tarp that has some objects on it. You can work, if you get a tarp, some plastic bottles, and some water, you can expand everything in your horse's mind in a very small area. And so that's an unmounted skill that kind of goes over to it. Another thing that I kind of introduced it a little bit was crossing water right there with the tarp. It taught my horse a lot to go out and just cross as many puddles as we could find. And I just put on my muck boots and off we went walking, crossing puddles. And this is a great time of year to do that. So crossing water now is going to help you out for the eventers out there, and then for the competitive trail, and then for everybody if it happens to rain when we get to makeover time. So definitely crossing water, especially if it's not super muddy. You don't want to be doing muddy stuff if you have a bad tendon, but that can be done. And then my biggest thing I think is awesome to teach is standing at the mounting block, because it teaches horses to come over to you, to stand still, and to deal in different situations. And I actually took my horse while I was rehabbing to a show. I paid the grounds fee. I didn't intend to show. And I spent 45 minutes practicing him standing still at a mounting block. And then, you know what? We've never had a problem at a show since. So that's another skill that you can stand, is standing at the block and waiting. Don't get on right away. Hang out, do your thing, come to me, move away. So those are my skills that are unmounted skills that can work on while you are out of the saddle. Back to you.
Yeah, so, well, and just one thing to mention too, that a lot of what specific skills that we're bringing up we'll mention oh, this is really good for the ranch people, this is good for the trail people, but we all want the same thing. We all want a really well-broke horse that's going to be brave and that's going to be courageous and loyal and tackle the horse park like a champion. And it doesn't matter what discipline you're going for, everybody wants a well-broke horse that's quiet and exposed to stuff. So this is a great time to do it. So even if you're oh, well, I'm not going to do competitive trail, I don't need to worry about crossing water. Spoiler, you're going to have to cross water at some point in your life. And if you're preparing your horse for sale, everyone wants a well-broke horse that can tackle the trail and, tackle just things in its life. So, scary blue tarps hanging at the end of the arena, everybody wants to be able to do that. So, and that's something that I think I remembered preaching last year, coming from, I used to be in academia, and people all the time were well, what's going to be on the test? And it's I don't care what's on the test. I just want you to learn things. So you can prepare for the test you think you're going to get at the makeover, but that's only going to get you into that very specific test at the makeover. So as opposed to teaching to the test, just teach to make your horse really well-rounded and able to tackle new stuff, and then you're going to have a much better time. Shannon mentioned standing at the block. I just said, all of this is not specific to discipline. I happen to be a ranch rider, and I happen to go out across the farm all the time. So I don't get to use a mounting block very often. So I just work on standing in general. So this is really good if you discover you have a horse that's a little barn sour or herd sour. Take him out on a hike, and at the farthest point away from the barn, then just stop and hang out and just stand and chill. I always want my horse to be able to stand quietly. For me, this sounds very millennial, but for me to be able to pull out my phone and send a text message, generally because, I'm oh, cow C17 needs such and such. I need to, text back to the head farmer. So I literally want my horse to stand quietly, maybe with a foot propped, dozing, while I send a text message or make a phone call or take notes in a notebook. So the first year, all winter, I would go hike, stand with my horse, and just stand there. And if he wanted to move, then he'd move his feet for a while, and I'd make him move his feet past the point where he wanted to, and then we'd stand again. So I was thinking about that this afternoon because I went out to check cattle and just stood there for 20 minutes. So my active riding time was probably about 8 minutes total to get out to the cow pasture and back. And the rest of the time we just stood there. And I was man, I'm really glad I installed that button 2 years ago when I was preparing for the 2018 makeover, because it makes life much easier now. And if you're thinking, oh, I don't ride on a ranch, I'm never going to need to stand, you've clearly never been to a horse show. So everyone has to learn to stand. Something else that might be fun if you're ever planning to hit up an open show, teach your horse some showmanship. Even if you never intend to show showmanship, if you have a horse that will walk nicely in hand with his head at your shoulder, will trot right off with you nicely in hand. First of all, Dr. Reed will appreciate that when we get to the arrival exam. But also just having a horse that's responsive to your body language and able to do all those showmanship things is really convenient. Anyone who's had to do showmanship in 4-H hopefully remembers the quartering system. That's actually how you should be standing when someone is examining your horse, not just where the judge is standing as you're doing your showmanship. So that's where you should be, in that quartering system for your farrier and your vet. So that's always good to get your horse accustomed to you, moving from side to side without him having to move his feet. And if you can get your horse to nicely set up on command, taking your sales photos will be so much easier. So all of you guys who are preparing horses for sale, or even if you don't think you are, but you might be, if you teach your horse to stand up now, it's going to make life way easier in August when you're taking your lovely confirmation photos for us, because that's what we use to market your horse. So do your homework now, get your horse standing up. Back to Shannon.
Okay, I just got my computer. I have 3 computers going. One of them just blew up, but I think I'm back now. This is actually a comment that Chris made a little bit earlier that we're about to talk about. And this is basically the work that you can introduce either outside or in the stall. This can be done. And if it were me, I would get my horse tacked up as frequently as possible without riding them, because you actually take away the anxiety that putting on my saddle means I gotta have a thing right now. So I honestly would, even when they are on stall rest, tack them up and have them stand in the stall with me, hanging out where it's safe. You walk by the track a lot, and actually there's a lot of horses tacked up in their stalls waiting patiently to go out for the next rider. But it's an important skill for them to learn and to know that just because I'm tacked up doesn't mean I need to get ramped up. We can stay calm there, and you can actually introduce in a stall or at the walk in the arena, if you're allowed to hand walk, lots of lateral work. You can teach your horse to side pass without ever getting on them, and that is not just important for those that are going to use the side pass. It's going to be important for dressage people when you start to introduce the leg yield. You can ask them to turn on the forehand and the haunches from the ground. The other thing I like to do a lot of, and Chris mentioned this is a great time to teach them to soften to the bit. You can stand in a stall and for 5 minutes a day, ask them to give and move their head and bend their neck and move their shoulder. And when you do that for a couple months in a row, when you actually get on to start riding dressage, oh, look at that. You have a horse that understands how to give, and that's a big skill. So I highly recommend doing that as well in a stall or out in there. It does also develop top line. And it puts you ahead of the game when you actually can ride, to do some of that lateral work and move over work and giving while they're in a stall or over there. And you can certainly work on carrot stretches and horse crunches. And those are not yoga moves. They are important rehabs for horses that we send out as veterinarians. And you can just Google carrot stretches and do a lot of those. So those are small things that will help you immensely to translate to all disciplines once you get past them.
Yeah, hopefully, I know a lot of what we're sort of preaching right now is like groundwork. And all of this is beneficial to all disciplines. I know some of their past trainers have discovered that, a little bit of this cross training, even if you don't traditionally maybe do a lot of groundwork in your discipline, doing all these little homework bits now really pays off much, much later. This might be a good time to try a little bit of body work. And that's not necessarily like teaching yourself chiropractic on your horse, because I don't recommend that unless you're actually going to chiropractic school and you know what you're doing. But I recommend something that I find very user-friendly and easy to learn, and something that you are not going to mess up your horse with, unlike maybe teaching yourself equine massage, which again, I pay a practitioner who knows what they're doing to do that. But Ttouch, it's like a fascia massage, and it's like a body work for the nervous system. And I've gotten to work with some of the creators of Ttouch, so I always make a plug for it. But if you haven't heard of it, look that up. That's really good for reducing tension in a horse. So if you have a horse with busy feet who doesn't want to stand in the cross ties, maybe, put in the homework now, it'll make it much, much easier later on. A horse that doesn't want to stand tied in the stall, or maybe a horse that, the minute you're hand walking, he doesn't want to stand quietly. I've had really good results with using a little bit of Ttouch just to get them to kind of think about their body, think think a little bit about like where they end. Some horses, it sounds a little weird. Some horses just literally don't know where their bodies end. So they're a little lost in space. A little Ttouch massage I found to be really beneficial for helping horses who are very tense learn to relax a little bit. I think it's just ttouch.com, but if you Google that, you will find all sorts of YouTube videos. She's got some great books to kind of learn how to do that yourself. But you can also just find your favorite bodywork practitioner, again, who knows what they're doing, and hire them to help your horse out as well. Oh, the next one is me. We have notes. Even if you are not ready to go to a horse show, you're like, I haven't ridden my horse at all, so why would I go to a horse show now? Now is a good time to do all those small pieces that go into going to a horse show, such as loading on the trailer. So if you are not in a land of frozen ice and snow, and you can safely load your horse in and out, this is a really good time to practice trailer loading. I'm only just now, 2 years later, many years later, like teaching horses to self-load. And I was like, why didn't I do this years ago? This is so much easier. So having a horse who will load quietly and safely now is going to be much, much easier when you start to go to all your horse shows for your field trip Fridays later in the summer. I know Shannon has a lot more to say about trailer loading.
Yes, that is me. So again, most injuries, unless your horse is like wicked crazy loading onto the trailer, you're probably going to be able to do this during a rehab period. So if your horse is spazzing out, moving a lot of sideways, that might have to wait a little bit, but most of the time they can handle this. And when we say take for trailer rides, we're not kidding. Like, I literally take my horse on errands when I first get them. And you got to be, pretty good at trailer driving. And if you don't have a trailer yourself, maybe pay a trainer to come by and pick you up on the way to a show and just hang out at the show. And so certainly if you can go to the post office, if you can get your hair cut, if you can go to the grocery stores are great because you can park in a big parking lot and leave them far away, go inside, get a few things, come out and check on them, go back in. The reason we want you thinking about this is it engages their brain. It teaches them that the trailer is not a stressful situation. Everyone's going to haul into the horse park because as far as I know, no one lives there this year at the actual horse park, maybe some from the Secretariat Center. The other thing is when you get there to unload, we're going to be moving people through quickly. So, and when you reload, we're going to have so many horses going in and out that it would be amazing if everybody's horse knew how to load well when we got there and unload. That's big, but I can't tell you, and you kind of heard this as a theme, how helpful it is to just get your horse and take them out. And I have paid so many haul-in fees, never intending to show. It usually costs you probably around $50 at the schooling shows, maybe even less than that, $30 to $50 to go, hang out for the day, let your horse eat at the trailer. And then when you get there, just walk around in hand and walk around the warm-up arena until your horse is so bored with being around the warm-up arena that it doesn't bother them anymore. This is a good time to invest in a rope halter if you don't already have one, because it's just a great tool to use. But sign up for haul-in shows without the intention of ever getting on. Take the pressure off you, take the pressure off the horse, make it boring. And okay, I did forget to bring the prop. Ooh, hello, can you still hear me? So my internet connection is unstable.
Oh yeah, it got a little choppy, but you're still
So there's a book, I think it's 101 ground exercises you could do, and it's a flip book, and it's about $25 online. I'm pretty sure it's called 101 ground exercises. Maybe the next time that Kristen is talking, I'll go run and grab it out of the next room. Get that book and do all 101 of them at home, at the show when you haul in, and by the time you get there, you're going to have an amazing thing. So if you're like, okay, they threw all these ideas with me and I forgot them all, $25 to get you a laminated flip book that will live through the rain.
All right, I can yammer on for plenty of time if you want to.
I'm gonna go grab it. Hold on.
I can blather on about anything for as long as you need. So I know, like Field Trip Friday and everyone's showing like, here's my horse and all the ribbons it won already this weekend because it's amazing. Field Trip Friday, of course, does not have to be horse shows. Field Trip Friday can be, I think for me, I took 3 trips into Pennsylvania from New York to meet a practitioner who was only licensed in Pennsylvania. So that was like our first 3 field trips, was to go down the highway, cross the state line, and then go back. So that was pretty low pressure. And then actually he really liked it because he really likes his chiropractor. So that was our first 3 trips. And then we took a day trip just to ride in a big indoor arena. Very nicely, they turned on their PA system for me and blathered on over the PA so that we could get exposed to that. Rode in company with a bunch of other horses. who were much fancier than we were. So it gave jobbers something to look at and aspire to. And then we went back to a one-day schooling show off the trailer at that same facility. So that was kind of cheating. I went to the facility first and walked around. And then we went to one overnight show just to get that overnight experience. And I think that is pretty important, if you can, to try to switch it up a little bit. Because I ended up having big problems at the horse park with my horse did not want to be inside for more than 2 nights. So we were there for, I think, 5 nights, and he was over it by like day 2. So if you can get them to an overnight show just to make sure that like all systems are go for that, I think that's going to be really helpful. You know, but work your way up to that and take lots of little short trips. So Field Trip Friday does not always have to be going to a horse show and winning lots of ribbons. So in fact, it's probably easier if you don't wait till you're at the point where you think you're going to go and win a lot of ribbons. Like, just go and have a good time. I think Aubrey Graham mentioned that a couple magazine issues ago, that, you know, don't wait for your horse to be ready to show. Just go to the show. You know, you don't want to be that guy with the horse on the string, you know, flying over your head, but, you know, you definitely want to go and kind of establish your baseline and figure out what you have to work on. So don't wait for it to be perfect. Just, you know, go and have a good time. All right, what'd you bring us?
Okay, I read it back. I'm not sure if you can see it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it is, it's written by Cherry Hill, and it's 101 ground training exercises, and it literally is a flip book that says all these different building blocks and everything like that. So it's just a really awesome little tool that you can sit, and some of them seem really simple, but they're building blocks for moving all the way through to sort of finishing off a horse to get ready under saddle. So it's by Cherry Hill, literally spelled like the fruit on the hill, and 101 ground training exercises for every horse and handler. And I guess the point of what I'm trying to say, and I think I'm hearing from other people, is 95% of what's going to go on at the makeover, maybe 98% of it, has nothing to do with the 5 minutes you're in the ring. But that 95% is going to make or break the other 5 minutes. So if you get something wrong with your horse and you have to take a step back, work on the other 95%, then the 5% that's going to end up in the saddle.
And I'll speak to that 5% of time that you are in the ring. I know, you know, people are worried about riding to that test that you're going to have. But if you get your horse broke forward, backwards, and laterally, and that horse trusts you, and you guys have a good relationship, like, the rest of it is so easy. So just get a good working relationship with your horse, get your horse as broke as you can get it, and then just enjoy the ride from there. So if you and your horse have a good relationship and you guys trust each other, then makeover is easy. Easy peasy. Stick a fork in it. And the other thing you can always do, if you're really stuck and you have none of these things sound like they're going to work for you, I personally would be very surprised, because that was a really long list of things you can do. But if none of these things are anything that you can do, you can just give your horse time off, let it eat a lot of hay, let it get nice and fat and happy, and I guess we'll see you again in April or May when it thaws out. But hopefully we gave you guys enough to go on and enough things to inspire you and get everybody thinking creatively and ready to run out tomorrow and tackle training from the ground for the makeover. I'm all inspired now, and we're getting 3 more inches of snow tomorrow, so I've made it worse for myself.
I'm going to take my horse on a field trip tomorrow. I'm going to take him to work with me just for fun.
That'd be fun. I usually bring my work to the horse, so. Does anybody else have any other questions for us live? We'll try to, you know, keep an eye on questions too over the next day or two as people, you know, catch up after the fact. Anybody who's still at work or had a conflict and couldn't watch us live, we'll try to keep an eye on questions and hopefully get those answered for you in coming days. But we'll hang around a little bit and just see if anybody else has anything to add.
And I think since most of you are already on the Facebook page, you know it's a great tool. If you're stuck somewhere and you have to take a step back into rehab, and you're like, just throw a question up there. Hey, anybody got some fun things I can do while I can't ride? So someone did just say, is chiropractor good for these horses? This is a landmine for me as a veterinarian in a good way. Yes, for the most part, chiropractic work is good for horses. I'm going to put the plug in there when as much as possible to use a chiropractor either associated with heavily or an actual veterinary chiropractor to make sure that things aren't being made worse. In fact, in most states, it's actually illegal to practice chiropractic work and not be a veterinarian, but that's a whole nother issue. But yes, I think that there are some definitive things. The thing that most chiropractors are really good at is looking at the whole horse, taking a really good evaluation of what's going on and knowing the anatomy. And so for the most part, unless your veterinarian says don't have any adjustments done, then I think that we're coming around to thinking that chiropractic work is going to be good for a lot of these horses.
Yeah, and I will, hello dogs, I'll sort of amend what I was saying earlier, that, you know, one of the reasons I'm going out of state and going into Pennsylvania is because it is a vet who is a chiropractor. And that was after assessing that, like, no, the horse is not lame or unsound or injured. The horse is just like crooked and just needed a little extra help. Is it hard to get a horse from 24/7 pasture back into a stall? Same, Elise. We're going to be friends. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend hitting up an overnight show if you can, to get a horse back into a stall. To get me through the week at the horse park, I missed the boat on renting a round pen, but I had some lovely friends who loaned me some time when I just really needed to let the horse blow off some steam. And then otherwise, all the stuff I was doing over the winter with hand walking and walk riding, I walked most of the week at the makeover. There was the year in 2018, last year, it was like a burnt, barren wasteland at the horse park because it was, I think, Kentucky's like worst drought in history or something like that. The year before, Kentucky was quite lush and lovely, so we did a lot of hand grazing. I think there's also a night watch service that will help keep an eye on your horse overnight. That's like the best $10 you'll ever spend at the makeover. I was not admittedly a convert to that right away, and then I got there and was like, yes, please sign me up. So hopefully that helps, Elise. It's not necessarily, I mean, it really is going to depend on the horse. But yeah, just try to do your homework. I don't have a barn that's currently set up for overnight stalls either. So it was really going to horse shows and learning there what I had to deal with. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and that might be a good time to pay a haul-in fee and not ever intend to show, is because you can spend a lot of time with your horse at the stall, get a stall guard and a chair and a book or a Kindle, whichever we use these days, and just hang out with your horse, pay that fee, start with an hour in there, take him for a lot of walks. So I think that's that probably would cost you a little bit more because you got to pay the stabling fee, but that would be a good time to find out how do they do and just get them used to that process. And you can also talk to your veterinarian when you're starting to introduce something stressful about the whole idea of ulcer guard or gastrogard, whether you should be on that when you're introducing some of these new things, or if there's other things that you can be doing as well to help with stress of travel.
Elise, I would recommend joining some of your like local or state equestrian groups. Like I'm in Western New York, which I jokingly always call a horse desert. Again, one of the reasons I have to haul out of state to find good practitioners. But joining some of your regional or state equestrian groups, you'll find a lot of activities. And again, even if you're like, well, I'm preparing this horse for dressage, but there's a hunter jumper show going on next weekend, just go to the hunter jumper show, you know, or go to the ranch show, or go to whatever, you know, even if, especially if you're not intending to actually compete, like just get the horse to an environment. That's going to help a lot. So.
One thing we wanted to hit a little harder, which we kind of have mentioned a few times, just trail rides for every discipline, exposes, and, you know, lots of local association, meetup groups for trainers, trail ride, because essentially the makeover at the horse park is a lot of trail riding to get around the park. And so you're not going to be losing on that, and it just helps your mind so much. So if you're limited and your horse is getting fried in the arena, get out and go on a trail ride.
It's 3 hours too far to go for a show regularly. So right now, to show reined cow horse, I'm hauling 6 hours one way. So no, it is not too far. Of course, it's, you know, it's up to what your horse is used to for the trailer, you know, and like what you're comfortable with as a hauler. But, you know, if your horse trailers well and you're, you know, taking care of the horse on the way, then yeah, go for it. So yeah, I put in a lot of miles last year.
Yeah, and like I said, I started with just going to the hairdresser, and now I have a horse that I have a trailer that fits him pretty well, and he hangs out in it. We go 3 hours to the horse park all the time. Sometimes I'm on call and he goes with me. I go to a lesson, I get called in for colic surgery, and he stays in his trailer with his snacks and happily doesn't make a fuss the whole time. So I don't think 3 hours is too long if you build up to it. An hour the first time, 2 hours the next time, and then your horse can go and wait while you do colic surgery in the trailer happily.
I'm just gonna send my horse to you, Shannon. You can haul him.
I can make them be happy in a trailer.
Send them to me and I'll get them broke with cows.
People always come inside and they're like, is your horse outside okay? Yeah, he's fine.
Yeah, he's just chilling.
He's got his alfalfa pellets in his water bucket. He's good.
Awesome. All right, well, I don't see any new questions coming in, so I think we've hopefully satisfied the public, but yeah, hopefully that's some good ideas for you guys and inspiration for you guys to come up with ideas for your own. But yeah, just, get out there and get it done. And, even if you're stuck or you have no arena or it's dark all the time, daylight savings is either coming or coming to an end. I don't remember how that works. Either way, we're about to get more daylight. But yeah, if you are stuck on the ground, this is definitely not wasted time. There's plenty of stuff you guys can do. But, ask your questions in the group too, and we'll all help find some new ideas for you. But, best of luck. Enjoy the ride or the hand walk.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Have a good night, folks.